This is what I like to call flying too close to the sun. It's when someone sees an opportunity for some kind of personal gain, but they fly too close, their wings melt, and they fall to their death. Thus, we have the story of Jim Acosta, who is outraged that they wouldn't call on him at a press conference. We have this story from the Daily Wire. CNN's Jim Acosta loses it after not getting called on at a news conference. Well, whether you want to say lose it or not, he did get upset. And then we have this story, which is also from the Daily Wire. Acosta whines about conservative media. Sarah Sanders wrecks him. So naturally, you're going to have the conservatives, haha, at Jim Acosta. But I will point out, Jim found an opportunity for building his personal brand. And that opportunity was grandstanding. I think Jim Acosta is a disgrace to news media. But of course, he generates ratings for CNN, so they keep him on. Jim Acosta is notorious for standing up and just giving lectures. Look, you're a journalist. You have a question. You can sort of qualify the question with something like, in the past, Mr. Trump, you said X, Y, and Z. Now we're seeing you say A, B, and C. Could you explain what changed and why you now feel differently in this, so you can clarify your question, prepare it. Jim Acosta, on the other hand, will say that, but then keep going and just stand there until someone yells at him. And then apparently, I know some people who work in media who don't want to say anything, but they find him to be a grandstander. He's there have been journalists who have said Jim just wants to get his own TV show. Yes, he's trying to get a TV show. He wants to build his brand and become famous, and he's trying to do it by being the resistance. But this is why he flew too close to the sun. It worked. But it got to a point where a White House aide, you probably remember the story, tried to take the microphone away from him, and he resisted. And then there was a big argument over whether or not she yanked it from him or not, which I think is totally irrelevant because he shouldn't have been resisting anyway. Give the microphone up. End of story. Well, now they're not going to call on you anymore. It's like, he killed the goose that laid the golden egg. Yes, you could have berated Trump all the time, but you pushed it too far and now you're out. And now he's upset. So let's read the story. Jim Acosta became perturbed. I like the use of the word perturbed. On Tuesday, after he was not called during a press conference with President Donald Trump and Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro. Acosta complained on air that a reporter from the Daily Caller was called on, that Brazil's president used the term fake news, and that conservatives are pushing back against the bias they face on social media platforms. Apparently, Acosta said, there was a lot of that going on during this news conference, but I think, Brooke, the thing that has to be noted, and we'd be remiss if we didn't note it, is that when the president of Brazil mentioned the term fake news, he got sort of a smile and a nod from President Trump. And this is something that we've seen since President Trump came into office. Called this network fake news, his referring to the press as the enemy of the people, and so on, is that this is a virus that is spreading around the world, Acosta said, according to a clip flagged by Newsbusters. When you have the president of Brazil calling the press fake news, he is trying to essentially, in a sycophantic sort of way, suck up to the president of the United States. There's no other way of putting it, and trying to emulate him down. And they call him in Brazil as the Trump of the tropics. This is another example of when the president of the United States says some things here in the U.S., referring to the press as fake news, referring to the press in other derogatory terms. Other leaders around the world, other governments around the world are listening, and Jair Bolsonaro proved that to all of us here in the Rose Garden News Conference, Brooke. Is Jim Acosta mad because they didn't call on him? This is what happens when you antagonize and you are not professional. Acosta, who had his press credentials suspended last year for making contact with a White House aide during a news conference, was confronted by angel moms last month after he challenged Trump over what he described as a disconnect in his description of illegal immigration. In that White House event, Jim Acosta was arguing over the president's policy positions, and the president, Trump said something like, "You let me be the president, you can ask the questions." And it would seem like Jim was pushing his personal opinion over what should or shouldn't be, which is not something you should do. You ask a question, get clarification. The funny thing, however, is that people have highlighted at the end of Obama's presidency, Jim Acosta stood up and said something like, "This has been your greatest week ever. What makes you think you were such a great president with a great week?" And it's very clear what he's trying to do. He's a sycophant who's trying to pander to a tribe instead of actually seek truth and break down what's really going on. Jim Acosta, in my opinion, is one of the worst of the worst. I don't think he should have got his press credentials back. He's clearly not a journalist. In fact, many of these companies don't employ journalists anymore. They don't have fact checkers, and they publish fake news. CNN recently published an analysis piece that used fake news claiming that YouTube radicalizes people, which is just, it's absolute misinformation. YouTube, if anything, pushes people to the left. I get recommended Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert and Seth Meyers all the time, and I never watch their content. The data suggests the platform is content neutral, but let's take a look at why they think Sarah Sanders owned him. Or Rex him, I'm sorry. Owned is the more of the internet nomenclature. On Tuesday, CNN's Jim Acosta complained. We know all that. Speaking with CNN's Brooke Baldwin following a presser with Trump and populist President Bolsonaro, yada, yada, yada. And then the president, yada, we get it. Oh, okay, here we go. There's actually more. He complained about a softball question. And then the president was asked that question by a reporter with the Daily Caller right at the very end. The question was asked in a way that really teed it up like a game of t-ball here in the Rose Garden. The president was just sort of served a softball there when he was asked whether or not the Democrats were advancing a lot of socialist ideas, complained Acosta. You called it a softball. He was asking for Trump to opine on a current issue. A softball would be something about Trump directly, not the Democrats. Sure, call it a softball, I guess, but it's not. It's okay. White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders responded with, "Dear Diary, best week ever." And the best week ever is in response to this video. Let's see if I can play it. Where Jim Acosta was kissing up to Trump, or to Obama, I'm sorry.
I wanted to ask you about what some people are calling your best week ever. Last week, you had 2 Supreme Court decisions supportive of the Affordable Care Act and of gay rights. You also delivered a speech down in Charleston that was pretty warmly received. It seems that you've built up some political capital for the remaining months of your presidency. I'm curious how you want to use it. What hard things do you want to tackle at this point?
In terms of my best week, now my best week, I will tell you, was marrying Michelle. That was a really
All right. We get it. So the point is, Jim Acosta was serving up softballs to Obama and literally just played up that it was his greatest week ever. Can I just point out that Obama extrajudicially assassinated several people? He is not the greatest president ever, and he did a lot of things that would shock and anger people if they actually had principles. However, Jim Acosta, on the other hand, is just someone trying to build a personal brand, and in my opinion, doesn't actually care about what's going on. He's just a personality on TV. I'll say this. Trump, in my opinion, has definitely opened the doors to the reality TV-ification of politics, at least more so than it's been, because it's always been a circus. But Jim Acosta decided to just play right into it, Sure, why not? Jump right in. But I disagree with him doing this, because all he's done is made everything worse. You can criticize Trump for his rhetoric and for how he acted in the debates. It doesn't mean 2 wrongs make a right. Now, here's what that means. Sanders was captioning a video of the hard-hitting CNN reporter asking then President Barack Obama about his best week ever back in 2016. I'm not going to read it. The video was posted by The Blaze's Jason Howerton. Jim Acosta today criticizing Sagar Anjetti versus Jim Acosta when Obama was president. As for the Dear Diary portion of Sanders' tweet, the White House press secretary was referencing a troll of Acosta sparked in June. Twitter politicos began captioning Acosta's tweets about Trump with the phrase Dear Diary, poking fun at his various Twitter soliloquies, lamenting how mean Trump is. Here is just a few examples of diary posts highlighted by the Daily Wire's Ryan Saavedra. There was a really funny incident where someone responded to Jim Acosta with Dear Diary. Jim DM'd the person with an FU. And then when this person screen grabbed it and posted it, Jim was like, "Oh, I was confused. I thought you were a friend of mine." But it's like, why would you even send a message to your friend saying F you? Like, I get it. Sometimes you can poke fun, give a little jab to your buddy, but that's not what Jim was doing. Jim got pissed, told some dude F you, and got called out for it and tried lying. Because this is how you respond to Jim Acosta when he tweets about his day. It's like, listen, look at some of these tweets. As I attempted to ask questions in the Trump White House press aides shouted in my face, "Why should I care about that, dude? You're supposed to be a journalist. You're not." Listen, a lot of people like to say, "Tim, you're supposed to be a journalist." Dude, I'm commenting on YouTube, man. I'm not on the ground in a press room holding up a microphone for the president and trying to get clarification. I assure you, when you see me on the ground and interviewing people, I don't play stupid games like Jim Acosta does. No, I'm not perfect. There have been a few instances where I've, definitely tweeted stuff about myself. But Jim Acosta does this all the goddamn time. So clearly, he's just trying to make himself a personality. He doesn't care about this. But you know what? It works because the people who don't like Trump are going, you go, Jim, asking those hard questions that get us nowhere. And they're not hard questions. They're silly and a waste of time. Look at this. All he ever does is tweet about himself because it works. 107,000 likes. What do they end with? Arthur Schwartz tweeted, a few CNN reporters told me that they're embarrassed by Acosta and CNN. A White House correspondent from a major network, not Fox, told me this isn't the Jim effing Acosta show. We all hate him. He's an a-hole, and he actually is disrespectful to the president. Yes, he's just trying to make a reality TV show about him. And God, he's an awful person. I'm going to leave it there. Stick around. I got another video coming up on the main channel, youtube.com/Timcast at 4 p.m. I will see you then.